If you're interested in improving your morning and evening routines, improving your sleep, and incorporating breath work and meditation into your daily life, then this video is for you. And if you're enjoying this channel, please be sure to subscribe. And if you've learned something valuable from this video, don't forget to hit that like button. Welcome back to another episode of the Live Life Longer show, where we discuss longevity, anti-aging practices, biohacking, having more energy, and living a happier, healthier life. Today's guest is a Forbes 30 Under 30 entrepreneur and finalist for ABC's Shark Tank, who's spoken in 24 countries. After founding Tembo Education, Phil Michaels has since become a performance coach, coaching mostly CEOs from Harvard and MIT, but also includes the #1 ranked poker player in the world and #1 ranked Saudi rapper in Dubai. He's also the host of the only podcast in the world that exclusively interviews entrepreneurs that made the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. Phil Michaels, thank you so much for joining me today.
Dan, such a pleasure. It's an honor to be here. I'm really excited about your show and your audience. Let's talk about health. I'm up for it.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have our conversation today. Really happy we got connected. We were connected through Lewis House's Inner Circle.
Yes.
And it looks like we have a lot of things in common in terms of entrepreneurship. And I know you have a health background. So let's kind of just get started with the idea of entrepreneurship. You know, I understand you were named Forbes 30 Under 30. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that journey and how did you develop the skill set that you needed to be a successful entrepreneur?
Great question, Dan. And I'm sure there's a lot of entrepreneurs listening. Health is very much tied to business. Your mind and body are very much in one and tied together. So it's funny. I started out with the stereotypical lemonade stand as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I stole my sister's puppet show playhouse and I would bring it to the soccer fields and try and attract the soccer moms over. Oh, look at this cute little boy with the lemonade. So I'd sell the lemonade. And then in middle school and elementary school, I started selling Pokemon cards.
Nice.
So I had this baseball card binder and I would put all my Pokemon cards in there and I would go to school and I would try and flip them. I remember one day, Dan, I sold a Charizard for $50. Now, a Charizard, if you don't know, is the best card in the deck. It's the #1 card in the deck. If you have one of these as a prized possession, I sold it for $50. I ran to my mom. I said, Mom, I made it. You're never going to have to work again. We made it. Quit your job right now. I thought at that moment, $50 was millions and millions of dollars.
Right.
I'm never going to have to work again. Life is good.
Yep.
It just shows you your mindset and the limitations that you have as you grow and develop and cannibalize your old self. Then I went into high school. I was a bookie. So I would sell football pools to my friends in high school, pieces of paper. I would print out the matchups of each week and I would take a percentage of the pot. Then in college, I started a nightlife promotion company. And while I was in college, I was pre-med, by the way, this whole time. I had never looked at entrepreneurship as a career. And that's kind of the message I'm sharing is this whole identity that I had created was pre-med. I'm going to be an ophthalmologist, an eye surgeon. I had shadowed eye doctors since I was 11. And my whole trajectory, my whole path was geared toward medicine. Meanwhile, what was really happening whenever I had my own free time and it wasn't dictated by somebody else, I was doing entrepreneurial things, starting entrepreneurial ventures, having an entrepreneurial hustle on the side, but I didn't look at it as my main thing. I never looked at it as a career. It was just something I did in my free time.
Sure.
So I started a nightlife promotion company in college and ended up graduating, worked for the New York Yankees team physician. While I'm working for the Yankees, I end up joining up with a team member, a friend, to start a business, a fitness company. And we ended up becoming finalists on ABC's show Shark Tank for season 4. And great idea. Back then, there was no fitness apps out.
Yeah.
It wasn't saturated and competitive of a market it is now. So back then, this was a novel idea.
Right.
Now, even though we dissolved the business, what that did was spark this idea of, oh, wow, I could be an entrepreneur as a career. I could impact way more people in life than I could with just being a doctor and serving X amount of patients. It's limitless to how many people I can impact, and I can work for myself. I can make as much money as I want. So what I did was I decided to quit my pursuit of medicine.
Yep.
And my mother was like, who the hell quits the New York Yankees? And what the hell is an entrepreneur? So it was a pretty tough conversation I had.
Sure.
It was a pretty difficult, negotiation I had to have with my mother. But that led me to go get my MBA and Master's of Science in Marketing. I did a dual degree master's program to learn about business. I wanted to have acumen in business.
Right.
And yet my whole life, if I look back, I had been building entrepreneurial skill set, my business acumen, but I never looked at it as a career path until that moment.
That's really cool.
So to conclude, I was in grad school. I started traveling the world, spent time living in 5 continents, 24 countries. And I saw a lot of initiatives were donating either food, water, housing, or healthcare. No one was really focused on education.
Yeah.
It was more like a lot of people were giving the man a fish rather than teaching them how to fish. Figured, why not educate people to solve their own problems?
Yep.
And seems like a much more sustainable long-term solution rather than putting a Band-Aid on the problem.
Yep.
So when I started exploring education, I found most people were focused on secondary school or higher ed. And I figured that was way too late. No one was really focused on the most imperative time for brain development, which is 0 to 6 years old. So that's why I decided to start educating children from 0 to 6 years old. And I wanted to start in some of the most densely populated areas. So I started it in Nigeria, where I lived for a while, to build it from the ground up. And when I looked into 0 to 6-year-old education, I found there was 2 main solutions being offered: mobile apps or building schools. With regard to mobile apps, a lot of them in developing nations don't have smartphones. Yep. And the ones that do cannot afford the mobile data to require to run that app on your phone. And the ones that were building schools, that was not the answer. There was tons of schools. Living in arguably the worst slums in the world, I've witnessed it firsthand. There's tons of schools there. The problem is the schools are more like daycare drop-off centers rather than high-quality educational institutions. Sometimes they're 4 walls with little to no materials. Sometimes they don't even have a curriculum. Sometimes the teachers don't even show up.
Right.
So I said, okay, well, what could be a potential solution? I asked myself, what are they already using on a daily basis? Let's meet them where they're at using an existing distribution channel. They all had text messaging. Regardless of whether they had a smartphone or not, they all use SMS text messages. So I said, oh, let's educate them using text messages. So that's how we started the company in Nigeria. We educate 0 to 6-year-old children around the world using text messages. And now WhatsApp as well. We're in 5 countries. Nestle is our biggest customer. And we've launched in the US now. And so that's what got me to answer your question. That's what built my entrepreneurial journey and ultimately making it to the Forbes list. That's how I made it.
Yeah. God, it's such a cool story. I think I want to start off a little bit further back here with your pivot from stepping away from medicine into entrepreneurship.
Sure.
I think that connects with a lot of people, connects with me for sure. Because I am almost doing the opposite approach where I'm pivoting from, I'm still in entrepreneurship and running businesses, but just to give insight, I'm not sure if you're even aware of this. I'm actually a wedding photographer. I have a wedding photography business for the last 3 or 4 years. And I'm still shooting weddings, but this year, obviously not as much. Events are definitely downsized. And I'm still going to be pursuing that for the next year or so. But now I'm really kind of getting excited about this podcast and the opportunities I can have around health and educating people about better health. So now I'm starting to think like maybe I'm pivoting into more of a health guy and having the podcast and personal brand. So what I guess I'm kind of getting at is I just find it interesting that you were able to see certain signs or certain feelings that you might have had that maybe medicine wasn't for you. And I think you mentioned there that like you realized, I can actually get into something where I'm impacting more people than I am right now, just having my own practice or being an eye doctor. So I guess what I'm getting at here is I think it's just really cool that you were able to see those things and take action. And I think a lot of people can resonate with that.
That's a great point, Dan. And what I always recommend, especially to those younger in their formative years, still deciding where they want to
Yeah.
go shadow the people in the field that you're aspiring to work toward.
Yep.
Whether it's a lawyer, a doctor, a financier, whatever it may be, go and shadow them to see what it is like in the day-to-day lifestyle.
Yes.
If I would have known that early on, I could tell you right now, after working in the healthcare field, I worked in the emergency room, I worked in general practice, breast cancer, oncology. It's not the life that I want to live.
Yep.
And it's very similar to being a glorified employee, a 9-to-5 job. You're around people that, you know, have a condition. They're not happy. They're upset that they even have to see you. It's kind of a miserable workplace in most environments. So I have a lot of respect and admiration for those that can endure that. But you have to be a type of person that is willing to endure the stress that goes with the day-to-day lifestyle. Yep. Now, if you're in the pursuit of pre-med, you might not ever get that experience until you actually work in the career and get your white lab coat, for example.
Right.
Because as an intern and shadowing, it only gives you so much of an experience, but go and try and get immersed in the culture, in the lifestyle. What is this going to look like if I do spend 12 years of my life, all the money and debt I'm going to put myself in? Is this something I'm willing to do every day for the rest of my life?
I love that.
I think most people would reconsider how they're spending their time.
I think that's such a good practical step and idea for people to take. And it's something that Gary Vee talks about a lot. And actually your story of like early entrepreneurship reminded me a lot of what Gary Vee did is in his childhood with like lemonade stands and selling baseball cards and Pokemon cards. And but he does talk quite a bit about that period of time where you can experiment, especially if you're young. Like if you're just graduating high school, you know, you don't have to go into college right away and go for 4 years or 5 years and rack up all of this student loan debt. And then just to find out that you're not happy and you're not where you want to be and you're not pursuing something that you really want. So he said before, like, just go out, and if you have to like go mentor with a chef and see if you're maybe you're destined to be like the next best chef in the world, or go out and, you know, do something in health or in sports, or go teach or whatever it is that like you're interested in. If you have a few things that you're interested in, go out and just experiment, and then you'll learn what might be a good fit or what might not be a good fit. So I think it's great advice.
And some of those were personal connections and some were not. I literally just showed up to their office. Hey, I'm an aspiring pre-med student. Can I shadow you for the day? And I would go and look at different fields of medicine that I might have potentially wanted to work in.
Yeah.
So you could do that in any field, and they actually enjoy it because like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. And it's kind of a stroke of their ego too. Because like someone looks up to me, and they're more than happy to help a young kid or a woman that wants to go and shadow them and see what they do in their life. And I'm sure a lot of people might be thinking, if they already are in their career, like, man, I wish I would have done that ahead of time.
Definitely. Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's just a great way to kind of fast track what you're meant to be doing and what's really going to make you happy. So that's cool, man. In terms of, well, let's talk a little bit more about your current business model right now with is it an app that you have, or is it what's the model
so
there?
It's not an app. The whole idea is that you don't need an app. It's just through text messaging and WhatsApp. We send one activity per day to the parent's phone. Parent educates their child using that day's curriculum activity, and then we reward the parent for educating their child with Amazon gift cards, mobile data for their phone, whatever that culture needs, for example. And it's all based on Harvard Center for the Developing Child's developmental milestones. So it's sequential. We start at prenatal at week 13 in the mother's womb, all the way through 6 years of age. Because this is the most imperative time for brain development. About 90% of the brain is formed by age 4 and 5. So you want to get as much structured stimuli in the brain as possible during those years. And ours follows a very robust curriculum each day. There's a lot of companies out there that share parenting tips, but they're more like tips rather than a concrete, robust curriculum.
Okay.
And these are the activities we provide. And it's great. It's simple because a lot of parents out there are like, man, this one PhD in education, he He said he has 3 boys and he has 7 different passwords he's supposed to remember for the logins for his kids for the school, because they have different software and apps that they have to use. And he's like, Phil, I don't use any of them. But if I could get one simple text message every day to educate my child with, I would use it. So it's following that zigzag principle. When everyone's zigging, building mobile apps and robust software, we're zagging and doing the opposite, using something simple. 90% of people answer their text message within 3 minutes of receiving it.
Yeah. Text is huge. I think that's a really good insight to have, like the whole zig and zag idea. Everybody's going into apps and websites and social media, and texting is just so basic and it's so easy, and we all have it, like you said. Even people that are in third world countries that might not have a smartphone, they do have some form of technology with a phone of some sort, and they can get SMS text messages.
It works on any phone in the world, even if it's not a smartphone. And we also use WhatsApp as well now. We're an official verified partner with WhatsApp, so we have the official green check mark next to us, and it helps because nobody wants to download another app. And nobody likes answering emails, but everybody answers their text messages. And that's what happened with COVID. So COVID resulted in more companies reaching out to us that were not even education related. They said, Phil, we need to reach our customers, our team members, our potential customers in a different way than maybe we were doing before COVID. So can we use your texting service for our solar? We're working with a solar company now. We're working with a real estate company now. So we can provide these messaging services for any and all companies, not just education-related companies.
So that's cool. So the content isn't just tailored to one niche. It can be whatever that company or that industry, you're tailoring it to each client.
That's what's great about our company is our team. Most of them were from Harvard's Graduate School of Education. They're experts at curriculum development. They're really good at taking complex information and simplifying it that for a child to be able to understand through their parent. That's also helpful for adults. Adults like complex information being simplified. So we are really good at taking your material, whatever that content is, and simplifying it so it could be used on a text message, on a mobile phone, and also gamifying it. We make it fun with these daily quizzes. We do a pre and post intervention assessment to determine how well it's working. So there's 2 aspects of the business. One is we take your content and simplify it, so we help you make it mobile friendly. But 2, the delivery, we're the ones that send it out for you, so you don't have to worry about that. That's so cool. Yes, we can work with we could tailor the curriculum to whatever you need.
And then in terms of clientele, like, is this something that anybody can utilize? Like, is it something that I can be using? Like, who's your clientele?
So there's 3 main customers. The most common and the most popular for us is a company, a business, a government, a foundation that wants to pay on behalf of children receiving the education, for example. Nestle is a great example of this. Nestle pays for children to receive the education.
And they're using that, sorry to interrupt you, they're using that as more of like a philanthropic kind of venture to...
Yeah, they call it CSV, creating shared value. Similar to CSR initiatives, this is called CSV. They look at it as like, hey, we're providing so much for these families and children. The next time they go to choose a water bottle, maybe they'll choose Nestle water bottle rather than another brand. Second most common customer is a school or daycare center paying for their own children. And the third most common is a parent paying for their own child. So yes, a parent themselves can go sign up. And what we're working on now with the technology is allow any parent around the world to sign up on their own. That's in progress.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's what led to us being published in Forbes, and ultimately led to what I'm doing now, which is the coaching. So I'm still the CEO of the company, but I've automated it and systematized it enough where eventually I'm going to move to chairman of the board and hire a CEO to run it. So I could focus more on my coaching. What happened once we got published in Forbes, the owner of the Boston Red Sox was one of our first funders. We got a lot of notoriety and publicity, and that led to people reaching out to me and saying, hey, Phil, can you help me with my business? And I said, yeah, sure. Started helping on the side with friends. And what I realized, Dan, was 2 things. 1, I really love it. And 2, I happen to be really freaking good at it.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So I was lucky enough to be coached by Tony Robbins' son. He's my coach, and we lived in Tampa together for a while, became friends. So I learned a lot of the methodologies from them. And I lived in Boston for a while. So most of my clients are CEOs at Harvard and MIT. I actually coach startup teams as well at MIT. But it also includes the number one poker player in the world, the number one Middle Eastern rapper in Dubai. And that's led to me becoming more and more enthralled by the idea of helping others build their life and their business.
Yeah,
So
that's super
I'm
cool.
now doing that more full time as coaching.
Yep.
And that's what led to where I'm at now.
That's great. I can definitely see where that the business with the text messaging education opened up a lot of doorways for you with your coaching business. Before we get into the coaching, what is, if you're okay with sharing more information, and I'll give you an opportunity at the end of our conversation for you to have plugins where people can find you and everything. But what's the name of the company if people want to learn more about it?
Sure. It's Tembo. Tembo means elephant in Swahili. And the reason we chose that is because elephants are known for being the most compassionate parents in the animal kingdom. Since our education focuses on the parents of the children, we felt like it was a good symbol for our social enterprise. So Tembo Education and TemboTexts.com.
Okay, cool. That's TEMBO.
Yep.
Awesome.
Exactly.
That's great. And again,
Dan.
I'll have a minute for you at the end of our convo to share more about where people can find you. But in this part of the conversation, I'm sure people are listening and wondering, well, what's the name of the company? I want to learn more. So there you go, Tembo. Very cool. So Lynn, let's get into your coaching a bit. So obviously, you've worked with all kinds of different people. You mentioned that the main kind of goal there is to help them kind of just maximize their lives. And yes, it breaks down to business and finance and health. In relationships, but the overall arching theme there is just to live better lives. So what are some things that you're seeing with your clients? And maybe we can even just break it down to each one of those 4 pillars, with finance, relationships, business, health. What are some things you're seeing from your clients that they're struggling with the most?
Sure. Yeah, that's exactly right. Most clients come to me for those 4 buckets: business or career, finance, health, and that includes physical and mental or emotional, social. And then lastly is relationships. And for a while I was like, wow, I wish I would have known this about myself earlier. I wish I would have become a coach earlier because I love it so much. But then I realized my diverse experiences led to me being a better coach now. My pre-med anatomy and physiology experience helped me, working in medicine helped me with the medical background, the health background, working as a personal trainer at Orange Theory Fitness, being certified by the American Council on Exercise helped me build a fitness background so I could also help with the health. But then my finance background and business background, building my own companies helped me with the business and career choices. And then obviously investing helped me with the finance. And then lastly, with relationships, traveling to 24 countries, you have to have not just an EQ and IQ, you have to have a CQ, which is your cultural quotient. Being able to understand how relationships work, not just within your own domestic country, your own inner circle, your own bubble, for example, or where you grew up, but also how does that work across relationships in different cultures, different races, ethnicities, genders. How does that work? And that's built my acumen when it comes to relationship building. So those are the main 4 buckets people come to me with, and I train them in OKR methodology. So while I was living in Dubai, I was paid by companies to teach the OKR methodology, not just for individuals, but for teams. It was popularized by Google and Uber executives to be the most efficient and effective way to achieve goals.
Wow.
But it was founded by John Dewar and his team a while back, and it's now become more and more mainstream. But it's essentially objectives, key results, and then key actions. And other people have used this same methodology, but using different words. So you could look at them as goals, measurable metrics, and then habits. So I train them in that methodology because I've been using it for myself since 2017, but also my team for my ed tech company and other teams at other companies. And now I use it for my coaching clients because it works. One of the first things I do is assess them. Where are they at? Where they want to be? I then move into habituation process where we build this regular cadence, regular practice. We move into growth where we develop depth to complexity and introduce optimizations to overcome challenges and obstacles. And lastly, we work on pivoting. So double down on what's working, eliminate or pivot on what's not working.
Yeah.
And I show people how to build upon their strengths, double down on their strengths rather than spending their time, energy, and effort mitigating their weaknesses. It's a
Yeah.
much better, higher ROI. And an example of this is with their morning routine. That's the very first thing you do when you start your day. And I always tell people your morning routine is only as good as your evening routine.
Mm.
If your evening routine is off, you might wake up later than you wanted to.
Yep.
You might not have the energy to wake up jumping out of bed with tons of energy, vibrant energy, vitality. And one of the ways we do this is first, what does a typical day look like for you? Tell me your normal day, not what you want it to be, not what you've written down, not your ideal day, but what did today look like?
Yep.
And I have them share that with you. And I'll give you an example, and we could go into yours too, because I noticed, I saw your Instagram post of what you start your day off with, a fresh cup of coffee.
Yep.
Which sounds good. And I learned this from a neuroscientist, actually. So I'll ask you, Dan, out of food, water, and breathing, which one can you go the longest without having?
Food,
which one can you
water,
go the longest without
and breathing without having is, I believe, food.
Correct. And what will be the second longest you can go?
Water.
And lastly is breathing. So which one do you think is the absolute most important to start your day with?
Breathing.
Breathing. Ding, ding, ding. So
I was like, wait a minute, I got to get this right because I love all those things.
We need to bring oxygen to the body as fast as possible, as soon as we wake up.
Yes.
So I learned this from a neuroscientist. This is the first thing I do every morning as soon as I wake up is cat-cows with power breaths. And the reason you want to do the cat-cow pose like you do in yoga, where you arch your back on all fours and lift your back, your shoulders back, you want to send the cerebral spinal fluid through the spine, through the central nervous system. So it's igniting your brain. It's igniting your cells. And I always try to teach people, think of your body on a cellular level. Don't think about diet, exercise, sleep. Think about it on a cellular level. What would you need to do to ignite those cells? And the way we do that is water and oxygen is the very first thing. We want to start with oxygen. So 10 power breaths. I use a 1-4-2 ratio. So for me, that's inhale 5, hold 20, exhale 10. Inhale 5, hold 20, exhale 10. That's a 1-4-2 ratio. I don't recommend starting with that much. Start maybe with a 2-second inhale to get the 1-4-2 ratio a little bit easier for you while I'm doing the cat-cows. And that gets the cerebral spinal fluid going, gets the oxygen to the cells, because what happens is as you sleep, your cells denature, they shrivel up because they're dehydrated. They need oxygen to flow through the body. So when you wake up, the first thing you should be doing is getting oxygen and then water. So I'll immediately drink 20 ounces of water, flood the body to get the cells moving as fast as possible. Then I immediately go outside. And the reason I go outside is to get exposure of sunlight to my eyeballs. And the reason is because the eyeballs are the most vascular part of the human body. So that's where you're assimilating the vitamin D from the sunlight. So you don't look directly in it, obviously, but you want to expose it to that natural light. And it resets your circadian rhythm, which resets your chronotype. Your chronotype, by Dr. Daniel Pink's research, shows when do you most often exist with a circadian rhythm in the early morning, late morning, or evening. And he calls those a lark, a third bird, or a night owl. Lark are those people that wake up really early at break of dawn. Third bird is the majority of people. They wake up usually around 7 to 9 a.m. And then you have the night owls, of course. So each of these has a different peak, trough, and rebound. So there's 3 main periods throughout a 24-hour span of time. So your peak is your highest energy level. And you'll be able to identify this with your chronotype. And I share this on my website, which I'll share with your guests in a minute. But you want to find out, when is your peak? Is it a lark, early morning? Is it the normal morning, a little bit later? Or is it a night owl? So that peak is the highest energy level. Your trough is your lowest. Your rebound comes up, but not to the highest level of your peak. And so at each points of the day, you should be performing different tasks. So during your peak, you should be performing analytical, very important decisions. Things that involve numbers, metrics, Very, very important decisions. Your trough is when you want to perform creative tasks, insight task, introspection. So you want to be doing some things that involve maybe more interaction as well with other human beings. So creative tasks. And then a rebound is when you want to do more trivial, mundane tasks, answering the emails, administrative work. So that's why it's important to get the sun exposure to the eyes as fast as possible, so you ignite that circadian rhythm and the chronotype. So breathing first with the power breaths and the cat-cow poses to send the cerebral spinal fluid, water, sunlight, and then meditation. I do transcendental meditation. I was trained on it. It was a required course for the Ivy Leagues in the 70s. My teacher was from Cornell, and it's 20 minutes twice a day, unguided. It was, Maharishi is the one who founded it. Jim Carrey uses it, Ellen DeGeneres, Oprah, a lot of famous, Jerry Seinfeld, Howard Stern. A lot of famous people. But I always recommend, if you're just starting out, explore Headspace, Calm, or if you like variety, Insight Timer. Some people get bored of, let's say, Andy Puddicombe's voice on Headspace, or they get bored of Calm's, nature sounds, for example. Insight Timer is meditation practitioners from around the world that offer different meditations, long, short, guided, unguided. And so that it's an opportunity for you to learn that. If you're ready for TM, transcendental meditation, then you can experience that. But then I do something called rebounding. This is the last part of the week. Rebounding.
Sounds cool.
Are you familiar with it?
No, but go ahead.
Rebounding is what Tony Robbins does before he goes on every stage. It's a mini trampoline.
Yeah.
And what it does is lymphocyze the body, because when you're coming down, it's 2 times the force of gravity, which shocks the lymphatic system. And now what happens is something called autolysis. When you lymphocyze your body on a regular basis with the rebounder, autolysis happens, where your cells cannibalize old, dead, and damaged cells and replaces them with brand new ones. So I do that on my rebounder. By the way, it's a mini trampoline. Instead of the metal springs, it uses bungee cables, like 100 bungee cables around it. And it's way more powerful than a typical trampoline that you think of. So I have one in my bedroom, and I rebound it, and it ignites the body. Your energy's flowing, your lymphatic system's shocked. So
that's so cool.
That's what I learned from a neuroscientist. These are the things that you should be focusing on to start your day. Because what do most people start with? And this, I'm going to poke some fun at Dan here, because I noticed coffee was one of the first things he does on his list. Coffee's a diuretic. So coffee dehydrates you. It's the last thing. Your cells are already denatured from the dehydration. So you're actually worsening the effects. Now, you should get the water and oxygen first, the sunlight, rebounding then, and meditation. Then once you've done that, we can introduce a stimulant if you want.
Yeah, dude. So much to unpack here, and I'm so excited right now, because everything you just talked about in the last 5 minutes, I would say 90% minus the rebounding. I would say 90% of what you just talked about is everything I love and incorporate into my at least daily routine. I might not all be right in the morning, but where do I begin? First off, I had to look at my phone as you were talking about the Insight Timer, because I was like, wait a minute, I think that's the one that I use for meditation. It is. So if you're looking to get into meditation, you can check out that Insight Timer. I also practice TM. I haven't gone for training, which I know is like against the practice. Like, you're supposed to get trained and go through the actual like specific training of it. But I've kind of loosely practiced it for the last 5 years just on my own. And I know that's not the recommended way of doing it. You're supposed to go and get trained, because that's the proper way to do it. But I love TM. It's something that, for me, I've tried different types of meditation, but with TM, it was like the first time I really felt like I could connect with myself. And I know that sounds like super voodoo, like woo-woo and hippie, but it's incredible once you get into that pattern of it, like on a daily basis, and it gets better every time if you stick with it every day. I noticed after like a month, once I hit that 30-day or even into the 60-day mark, and I was consistent about it, I was like, whoa, this is incredible stuff.
That's how I got into it. So when I first heard about meditation, it was 2012 or 2013. And I came across this 21-day meditation by Deepak Chopra and Oprah. And so I was like, what's this? Started listening. It's a guided meditation. Started listening to it, and it's amazing. And I got hooked. I did the 21 days, and I'm like, what is this magic power, this superpower? Right? I started looking it up, and I came across this interview where Howard Stern was interviewing Jerry Seinfeld.
Yes.
And they start talking about this thing called TM, Transcendental Meditation.
I watched that too, yeah.
And he goes, if you remember, he goes, do you meditate? And Jerry's like, yeah, I'm a TMer. And Howard's like, oh, I'm a TMer as well. Yeah. Transcendental meditation. And so he goes, Howard, if I would have known about transcendental meditation back when I was doing Jerry Seinfeld, the TV show, Jerry Seinfeld TV show would still be airing today. Wow. And I was like, wow, that is a bold statement, because it's one of the highest revenue producing shows of all time. Yep. He said he used to wake up, he would do the acting with his co-stars. Yep. And then at the end of the acting day, he would have to go write the script with Larry David. So he had a whole nother work day ahead of him. Yeah. And because transcendental meditation is 20 minutes twice a day, he said, I would have done it right in the morning and then right after the acting, so he could have the energy to go with Larry David. He said it would still be airing today if I would have known about that practice. I immediately signed up the next day for training, because I thought that was such a bold statement. I need to get hooked on this, and I have. So
it's incredible
7
stuff.
years now.
It's incredible. Do you practice it just about every day?
Yes, 20 minutes twice a day, unguided. And for those that are listening, it's tm.org. I don't work for them. I don't get a compensation for saying this, but it's a one-time fee. You get trained in it, and then you're a TMer for life. Yeah. And it's pretty interesting how it basically takes the brain waves below your level of consciousness that you reside in when you're sleeping. Yeah. So they've found that the alpha waves on normal meditation only reach about 20 to 30%. With transcendental meditation, when you're hooked up to an EEG, it reaches 90%. Yep. So this isn't just some airy-fairy woo-woo stuff. They've actually tracked it with, I actually use the Muse now. It's an EEG that hooks up to your brain to track these brain waves to see. I love the scientific approach. That's my pre-med background coming in there.
I think what you just said there was what I was trying to find in my wording when I said that like TM is like the most connected I've ever felt to myself, whereas other types of meditation, whether it's guided or it's calming music, I think it's the brain waves there that it's just not getting to that same level, whereas with TM it's like a totally different level.
And you can do it anywhere, anytime, with anyone or alone. I've done it in the slums of India to the slums of Nigeria to in my own place. It's
I've done it on an airplane. It's pretty wild. There was so much else you mentioned here. The circadian rhythm. There's also a really good book. It's called The Power of When. I can't remember the author of that, but
when. I'll have it. That's Dr. Daniel Pink. So he's the.
Is that the same book?
Yeah, it's just called When by Dr. Daniel Pink. It's on my bookcase.
I'll have to find it. I'll put the link into it. I think
he's the one that developed the chronotype test, and I share it on my website. You could find out more about it, because the URL is kind of funky. It's got a bunch of like letters and numbers in it. But there is where I provide the assessment, so you could find out what is your chronotype. So throughout the day, when should I be performing each of these types of tasks?
Yep. Yeah, it's super cool stuff. So it must be the same book that I'm thinking of. I've recently read it, and it's pretty neat. Like you can go through like it's not like a personality test, but you can go through like, I perform this task better at this time. And like you start kind of piecing together what kind of chromosome type you are, and then it gives recommendations on
chronotype. It's one of the first things I do with my clients to analyze when they perform best, and then we try to introduce their day in a way that allows them to be in an environment that's conducive to them thriving, not just surviving each day, but how do we get the absolute best out of Dan every single day?
Exactly. It's great stuff. And then with the morning routine, I loved everything you talked about there. So breathing, I love that you asked about like what's the first thing we need when we wake up. Breathing is something I've gotten into quite a bit, really in the last, I would say 6 months to a year. Have you heard of the Wim Hof Method?
I saw you looked into the Wim Hof Method. I saw some of your posts and stuff about it.
That has been probably the biggest transformational thing I've done in the last year, for so many reasons. But I think the big piece there is breathing. And it's something I like to do in the morning. I don't necessarily do it. Maybe I need to switch it up to do it first thing in the morning rather than going out
for coffee. I saw you do it after your coffee. I'm like, Dan, we need to talk about this.
I will say, in my defense, you were talking about water and coffee. I do have a glass of water before I have the coffee. So at least that's the very first act I do. Actually, my very first act I do is make my bed. And then I get a glass of water. And making the bed it's so basic. It's so simple, but at least it sets you up for completing your very first task for the day. And in my opinion, it makes you, it allows you to get into that mindset of being task oriented. So
there's actually science behind that. And I also make my bed every day too. I didn't share that because I assume that actually most people do that now, but I shouldn't assume
they
that.
Don't. You'd be surprised how many people don't.
Yeah, you're right. And there's science behind it though, because they show that just completing that task increases dopamine and serotonin, which gets you happier. And so you're actually more motivated to keep the momentum cycle going. So you're more interested in completing another task. It's the same reason that cleaning your house works, because you're getting things done. Your progress equals happiness, and happiness is that influx of dopamine and serotonin, which leads to you having the motivation and desire to want to do other tasks.
Yes.
So you're getting more done. You're being more productive.
Yes, I love that. So then with water, I make sure I drink water, and then I go outside and I go for a walk, and that's when I have my cup of coffee. And maybe I need to wait a little bit longer. I think that's actually something in the book is they recommend having coffee, if you do drink any caffeine, wait a couple hours after waking up and not be your first thing, because like you 100%. Mentioned, it dehydrates you, right? And
your cells are already denatured. We're trying to bring water and oxygen so they fill back up to their normal size so their cellular membranes expand so they can move quicker through the bloodstream. So much happens when your cells everything is made of your cells, your hair, your brain, your skin tissue, your blood tissue, everything. So we want to make sure that we're working on the cellular level. In the book, When, he talks about something, your fans will love this, your audience will love this. So this is called a nappuccino, Dr. Daniel Pink's research. So they found that coffee hits the bloodstream at about 20 to 25 minutes. So you want to, if you're going to meditate, you drink your coffee right before your meditation. Or right before your nap. So he calls it a nappuccino. I created the medicino, which is you do it right before your 20-minute meditation. So by the time you're done your meditation, the caffeine has hit your bloodstream, so you get an influx of stimulation. So he talks about it with naps. Now they found that, and if your audience likes this, we'll talk about naps for a second. There is a way to perform a nap properly based on his research. And they found that anything over 20 minutes had a detrimental effect on your energy and your brain. Wow. Anything below 10 minutes had no statistical significant effect. So the ideal time is between 10 and 20 minutes. Anything more than that was a detrimental effect. So, so the question is, that was how long? Well, when should you do it? And they found that 7 hours after you woke up is the ideal time to have a nap, where it doesn't affect your sleep for the next day. Wow. So set around I think it was between 7 hours, and you have a 20-minute plus or minus cushion. So it doesn't have to be exactly at the 7-minute mark, as long as it's within 20 minutes plus or minus that 7-hour mark. And then the nappuccino is, on average, it takes about 7 minutes for people to fall asleep. So if you're going to take your nap, you could set your timer for 27 minutes, drink your coffee, it's a nappuccino, then you take your nap. By the time you wake up from your nap, the coffee has hit your bloodstream. And he recommends this because on his research, they found that people that didn't nap versus people that did nap versus people that did the nappuccino. And they found that out of all of them, the ones that performed best on the cognitive exam that they performed pre and post intervention, the biggest statistical significant increase was on those that did the nappuccino. And then they took it a step further and extrapolated a bit further. It was those that did it regularly. Wow. So ones that tried the nappuccino once a week versus those that did it regularly throughout the week, that consistency.
That's so cool. So then do you think with the medicino, do you think it has the same effects as a nappuccino?
So with the meditation, I don't typically nap. So that's why I prefer the medicino,
Right.
where you meditate. And they've shown that meditation increases the gray matter of the brain. So this isn't some airy-fairy woo-woo stuff. There's actual
Yep.
scientific evidence that shows the physiological effects of the brain are changing it because of neuroplasticity. So the
Yep.
physical brain is changing over time, and this is where my education from early childhood education comes in, of working with my ed tech company. The most imperative time for brain development is 0 to 6.
Right.
More specifically, malleability of the brain starts at 100% as soon as you're born. As you're born, it drops to almost 50% by the age of only 8 months old. 50%.
Whoa.
It drops another 50%, almost 50%, by around 4 to 6 years of age. So almost 0% malleability, meaning it's very hard to change the brain because the malleability of the brain is dropping. At the same time malleability is dropping, the physiological effort to create new neural connections is increasing. So it's actually harder, takes more cognitive energy, more cognitive bandwidth. So this is by 4 to 6 years old. This happens to almost 0%. This is why it's so much easier for a child of that age to learn a new language than it is for us at our age. The cognitive bandwidth has been depleted. And this is something called synapse pruning. By the age 2 to 4 is when synapse pruning starts, where basically your brain says, we're using up a lot of energy to fire these synapses to create these new neural connections. We need to conserve energy. The human body is always trying to conserve energy. So what the brain does is says, these synapses that aren't firing that often, let's prune them off. We don't need them. We're not using them as often. Let's just keep the ones that we're using most often. So what happens is that happens for the rest of your life. There is some malleability still left, but it's much harder to create those new neural connections. So those are gone. So unless you're getting structured stimuli in the brain on a regular basis between these ages, this impacts you to 40 years of life and later, studies show.
Wow.
So into your adulthood. So it's so imperative to focus on the brain, cognitive bandwidth. And if you're an adult, you're like, well, Phil, I'm not 6 years old anymore. What the hell am I supposed to do?
Right.
This is why doing things to help the brain performance is so important. So such as brain training games like Lumosity or Brain HQ, the one Tom Brady uses. That's the one I use. Learning new things, novel exploration, novel adventures, novel activities, sensation acuity. So meaning like when you're in the shower, focus on the sensation of the water on your skin, of the shampoo in your hair, and really try to dive into that sensation. Little things like that. I just interviewed a neuroscientist on my podcast and also a Forbes 30 under 30 member. And he was sharing this, how the sensations is so important to brain activity. And how much do we go through our day where we just let these activities go through as we become desensitized to them.
Right.
So bringing back that sensation is really helpful. And
definitely.
This kind of ties into the last thing I'll say about this is, remember, your morning routine is only as good as your evening routine. So what do we do in the evening routine? This is what I share with my clients. Anchor your evening routine to certain activities. So if you brush your teeth at a certain time each day before bed, make sure you're anchoring other wind down activities to that. An example of this is temperature and lighting. These are the two most often I recommend. So we want to remove any blue light screen time about 2 hours before bed, ideally, and then turn the temperature down. Studies show around 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit is the ideal temperature for sleep, and then turn the lighting down. So my girlfriend and I have a Himalayan rock salt lamp, and it basically sets the tone for the lighting. And that's like our bedtime trigger. So it starts setting off the melatonin in the brain and we start winding down.
Yep. Dude, that's so good. I love that idea of the nighttime routine being just as important as your morning routine, because I feel like morning routines get so much spotlight and people forget about a nighttime routine and how important it is to set yourself up for good sleep, because without good sleep, it's hard to function the next day. It's hard to make good choices. It's hard to be productive. You're more likely to eat unhealthy and not exercise. So like, in my opinion, sleep is kind of that foundational piece. So I love having that nighttime routine at the front there. And it's something that a lot of people kind of forget about. So I love also with temperature, I like to dial down my thermostat to around 65, 66.
So
and I
important.
notice a huge difference in the quality of my sleep if it's at like 65 compared to 68 or 69 or 70. Such better sleep
So
when it's
important.
a little bit lower. Yeah.
Jerry Seinfeld has a funny skit on this. He talks about how nighttime guy versus morning guy. Nighttime guy doesn't care about morning guy. He's like, I'm going to eat those late night snacks. I'm going to watch that extra Netflix session. He goes like, morning guy, I'll take care of the no sleep.
It's true though. You don't realize that in many ways it's two different people, right? Like if you do stay up late and watch Netflix and scroll on your phone, think about how many people bring their phone into bed and just scroll through Instagram or TikTok, and we don't
my
realize.
My girl and I we have a rule: no phone allowed in the bedroom. So we keep technology out, and you have to delineate your spaces. One of my Harvard clients, because of COVID, a lot of people are working from home now. Well, if you do work from home, that could start to translate and transfer into other areas of life where it's impacting. Where is your work spilling over?
Yes.
So we delineate spaces. So if this is the table you eat at, you're only allowed to eat there. If this is the table you answer emails at, only answer emails there. This is where you sleep. This is where you play. This is where you meditate, whatever it may be. Make sure you're delineating your spaces so you're training your brain to move into that space. And I learned this from a writing coach, because when I was having writer's block, I went and entered into this coaching session, and they shared, make sure you have a desk that's only used for writing. You have a pen that's used for the writing. You have an outfit you wear when you're writing. So you get into the mentality of training your mind to visualize, now I'm here to write.
I love that.
You don't indoctrinate it with other, spilling over of habits.
God, it's so important, especially right now during COVID. Like you said, a lot of people are working from home, and unfortunately that just kind of like removes any barriers we previously had on designated spaces. Like you said, like this is the table you eat at. This is the desk you work at. This is where you like watch TV. This is where you sleep. This is where you have sex. Like this is it. Like
sometimes it all becomes one.
Yeah, it all becomes one, especially in the bedroom. Like with the phone, I guess an easy example is to remove the phone is like take your phone charger out. Don't even have a phone charger in your room. So then that way when you're like winding down and you need to charge your phone, you're not tempted to just put it right by your bed. Like just remove that out of your kitchen. Yeah, exactly. And then some people will say, well, I use it for an alarm. Well, then get an alarm clock. Like, exactly. It's not too difficult, but that's great. I think those are all really great steps. And then the last thing you talked about, what was the name again of the practice that Tony Robbins, bouncing on the Rebounding. So tell us more about that. I know you talked about it briefly, but what is it that it does for us? Obviously it's giving us some physical activity and we're getting our blood rate going. What is it that is good for us?
If you can't get in the mind, get in the body. I always tell people, and there's something to be said about movement and getting the cells roaming through the body, getting the lymphatic. I mean, it's why your lymph nodes swell when you have a sickness, when you have inflammation, a bacterial infection, your lymph nodes under your armpit. Yeah. That's why, because your lymphatic system is saying, hey, we can't handle this. We're fighting infection here. We need help. So the way you can shock that, and if you're dehydrated and you're using diuretics, that could limit your lymphatic system for its capabilities. Your adrenal glands are overworked. So a way to flush out the toxins from the body is by rebounding. And then a process called autolysis starts to develop, where cells are dead, damaged, and old cells are replaced with brand new ones. So we're trying to, that's all aging is, right? That's all being unhealthy is cells are not able to repair themselves. Right. So they either die, they age, they're damaged. So we need to replace them with brand new cells, which the body's great at. The human body's amazing at repairing itself. Yep. But we can help it by not introducing toxins into the body.
Right. That's great, man. You just mentioned the cells actually recreate themselves, reproduce themselves more often than we realize. I had Dr. Stephen Gundry on my podcast a few months back.
Oh, he's
big
amazing.
Into the nutrition space. Yeah. And he mentioned, I want to make sure I get this right. I think he said every 90 days, 90% of our cells can be like recreated or kind of reborn. And
you know what I learned from
something
him?
most people don't realize.
Yeah. You know what I learned from him is fiber, how important fiber is in fruit. A lot of people juice. And he said the biggest mistake people make with juicing is they're not getting the fiber. So there's this whole celery juice craze, right?
Yep.
But your body metabolizes carbohydrates as sugar if there's no fiber. So he said the accurate way of reading a nutrition label is you take total carbs minus the fiber, add that to the total sugar. That's how much sugar you're actually getting.
Wow.
So think about how many people are drinking these fruit juices or juicing at home with vegetables, and they're not eating the fiber because they've eliminated it from the juice. So that's why I say just eat regular celery. Stop juicing it.
Exactly.
And I learned that from him, actually. So now every time I look at a nutrition label, first of all, always look at the ingredients, not the nutrition label. Right. But if you are going to look at the nutrition label, then the real sugar content you're getting is the sugars plus the carbs minus the fiber. So take the carbs minus the fiber. That's got to be added to the total sugar.
The total sugar that says that. Yeah. God, that is fascinating stuff. That's cool. I've never heard that. I'm going to start looking at that a lot more.
I know we're getting close to time, but Dan, I wanted to share with your audience one last trick. I invented this trick. I'm really excited about sharing it. It's called the 4-color reading trick. And I'll tell you why. It's about reading. Okay. So everybody reads books. I'm sure your audience reads a ton of books. The problem is a book is only as good as how often you reference back to it and apply it to your real life. If you just read a book and it sits on your bookshelf, you never got anything out of it, you never used it, you never applied it to your real life, it's a waste. So how do you get the most out of books? So I was having this issue. I was reading a book a week. I started this practice in 2014, and I wasn't retaining as much material as I wanted to retain. So I developed this trick. You've all seen this pen before. It's a Bic 4-color pen, and each color represents a different tactic. So I'll tell you each color. So red is any word that I'm not familiar with, and I define it right there in the book. Blue is my version of a highlighter. So instead of using a highlighter, you never want to use a highlighter because over time it fades in the pages. So you can't reference back to it. I learned that the hard way. So I use a blue pen for highlighting the concepts and major things I want to remember. Green is for action items. So anytime a book recommends another book in the book, or they say, hey, this company or this person, I will highlight it in green as an action item for me to go explore them further. Now, black is arguably the most important. So black is for these little mini Post-it notes. So you'll see these little mini Post-it notes. I use the black to write the page number and the concept within that section of the book. And it's all underlined in blue because of the highlighter. And so now when I reference back to this book, I don't have to reread the entire book. I just go back to the major concepts in the book. So this is called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. So this is an amazing book if you haven't already read it. There's so many fantastic statistics in here about the trigger, the habit, and then the reward, trigger, cue. It's the 3 parts. But like here is an example of something I wrote down. This is a study showing willpower is stronger when they have more autonomy. And here's it increased productivity by 20%. So now I can go back, I can read the part that I highlighted in blue, and I don't have to read the entire book again to remember that concept. So
that is brilliant.
And if you want to learn how to do this, I have a video explaining it in more detail on my website, and I'm happy to share that when you're
ready. Is so cool. I'll be sure to link that up in the show notes. I've never thought of that. I've never heard of that. That's really brilliant.
Thank you.
That's cool, man. Before I get to my last question, where can people find more about you? I understand you have a podcast of your own as well. Tell us a little bit more about where can people learn more about you?
Thanks for sharing. Yes, I wanted to share the insights I've learned from myself, but also other incredible Forbes entrepreneurs. So I have the only podcast in the world that exclusively interviews other Forbes list makers. So it's called Phil with Forbes 30. And you can learn more about me, my website, or my coaching, my ed tech company by going to imphilmichaels.com. Make it simple. And my Instagram's at imphilmichaels. Keep it simple.
Love that. Very cool. I'll have all of that linked up, and any books and products and things we've talked about during our talk, I'll have all of that linked up as well. So
Thanks,
Phil,
Dan.
this has been great. My last question for you is a little bit more about, your why and your mission. Who do you want to impact the most with your work?
It's a great question. When I think about impact, I think about humans in terms of their brains. Like, how many brains can I impact? And when I think about brains, I think about starting at the earliest age when we actually start at week 13 in the mother's womb, because that's the first time that neurons are created in the occipital and temporal lobe of the brain. So I figured, let's start where we can really make an impact, which is creating new neural connections in the brain.
Yeah.
So that's what I think of when I think of impacting people. But it's not necessarily a matter of who I want to impact. It's what am I passionate about and what am I good at? What is my greatest competency? And at the intersection of my greatest passion and my greatest competency is my purpose. That's what we call flow state. And I learned that from Dr. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi in the book Flow. He's the one that's been coined with the term flow state. It's become a buzzword now, but he's actually a Ukrainian psychologist who invented it. And he talks about flow state, which is your purpose. And the way you get to flow state is finding the intersection of your greatest passion and your greatest competency. It's the book I gift more often than any other book, called Flow. But,
love that, man.
So I want to impact as many brains as possible.
Yeah, that is so cool. I love that. Phil, this has been so good, man. Thank you for coming on, sharing your mission. I understood that you were an entrepreneur. You have lots of accolades with the 30 under 30 of Forbes, but I didn't necessarily anticipate having such good conversation around health. So I appreciate you sharing everything that you have today.
That means a lot to me. It was such an honor and pleasure, and I hope this episode helped you as much as it helped me.
Yeah, this is great. And honestly, I think maybe down the road, maybe we can do this again. So
yes, sir. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, Phil. Have a great day.
Thanks, Dan.